"Sir, my little brother isn't breathing," screamed the homeless little girl desperately to the millionaire. Richard Blackwell heard a scream. As he turned around, he saw a soaking wet little girl carrying a baby in her arms. The security guards were trying to stop her from coming forward, but she screamed with a heart-wrenching urgency, "Sir, my little brother isn't breathing. Please help us." Richard froze. The girl's large dark eyes, her face wet from rain and desperation, and the baby in her arms. All of it instantly transported him back to a past he had tried to forget for decades. "Let her in," he ordered, with the firm voice he used to command his 3,000 employees. The security guards hesitated, but they knew well the power Richard Blackwell held in that hospital, which received generous donations from his company. "But sir, they're homeless and—" one of them tried to argue. "Now!" Richard raised his voice and moved toward the entrance. The girl ran toward him as soon as the security guards backed away. The baby in her arms was breathing with difficulty. "My name is Richard. What's your name?" he asked, quickly guiding her inside. "I'm Emily. This is Michael, my little brother. He's 2 years old and started getting like this in the rain. We were trying to get back home, but he can't breathe right. Please help him," begged the little girl, who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Richard immediately called for the medical team that was attending to his hospitalized niece. Dr. Roberts, the chief pulmonologist, examined the boy urgently, while nurses took him to an emergency room. "Probable severe bronchospasm. We need epinephrine." And the doctor began listing medications as the team mobilized. Emily wouldn't let go of her brother's hand, even when the nurses tried to separate them for treatment. "I promised my mum I would never leave him alone," the girl insisted with surprising determination for someone so small. Richard observed everything from a short distance, his heart racing. There was something about these children, especially the way the girl protected her brother, that deeply affected him. "Where are your parents?" he finally asked, when the doctors had stabilized the baby and were transferring him to a bed. Emily hesitated, looking down at her own bare, dirty feet. "My mom, she couldn't come. We live far away, in the South Bronx. She works 3 jobs and can't lose any of them. My dad left before Michael was born." Her voice carried a painful maturity, as if she had lived much more than her few years of life would allow. "You came here all by yourself? This hospital is on the Upper East Side. It's very far from the South Bronx for a child to come walking," questioned Richard, increasingly intrigued. "I took the subway and then a bus. I can read the names. Then it started raining hard and Michael got strange." She paused, looking anxiously at her brother. "I saw this big hospital and thought they would help us here." Dr. Roberts approached Richard with a serious expression. "Mr. Blackwell, may we speak privately?" He nodded, but noticed Emily's attentive gaze upon them. "I'm not leaving, and I won't let you take my brother away," she stated with conviction, as if reading his thoughts. "Nobody's going to take your brother, Emily. I promise. I just need to talk to the doctor for a minute, and you can stay here beside him, okay?" Richard tried to reassure her. Reluctantly, the girl agreed, but she didn't take her eyes off them even when they moved away to the corridor. "The boy's condition is serious, Mr. Blackwell. It's not a simple cold or common bronchitis. The symptoms indicate a possible congenital pulmonary malformation that's manifesting now. We need to do more detailed tests, and that will cost—" The doctor hesitated. "Money is not an issue," Richard interrupted dryly. "Treat them as you would treat my niece." The doctor nodded but continued. "The problem isn't just financial. We need to locate their legal guardians. These are unaccompanied children in a vulnerable situation. I'll have to notify Child Protective Services." Richard stiffened. "Do what's legally necessary. But neither of these children leaves this hospital without the best available treatment, understood? And I'll personally take responsibility for them until we locate their mother." Back in the room, he found Emily, softly singing a simple lullaby to her brother. The scene was so tender, it transported him again to memories buried long ago. "Does your mother sing that song to you?" he asked, sitting in the chair next to the bed. "She used to sing when she had time," replied Emily without taking her eyes off her brother. "Now she almost never has time, so I sing to Michael to help him sleep." Richard noticed the girl's wet clothes, her body trembling from cold. "Emily, We need to get dry clothes for you. You could get sick like this too. I don't get sick. I can't. Who would take care of Michael and help my mum? She replied with simple, devastating logic. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. At that moment, something definitely changed inside Richard Blackwell. The 55-year-old businessman who commanded an empire in the construction industry, known for his coldness in business and the nickname Real Estate Shark, felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, a genuine impulse to protect someone besides himself. With one phone call, he arranged for children's clothes from the hospital store, food and everything else the children might need. His personal assistant, Deborah, arrived in less than an hour, surprised by her boss's urgent and unusual instructions. Are you staying here? She asked, confused, as she handed him the folder with pending documents he had requested. The meeting with the Chinese investors. Cancel everything, interrupted Richard. Or better yet, ask Robert to stand in for me. Robert? But you never let your brother handle important negotiations, argued Deborah, increasingly perplexed. Today is different, he replied simply, turning his attention back to Emily, who was now trying a sandwich as if it were the most extraordinary thing in the world. There's real cheese inside, commented the girl with wide eyes. The comment, so simple and yet so revealing, squeezed Richard's heart even more. While Emily ate, he asked her simple questions. Where she went to school, what she liked to do, what her home was like. The answers painted a picture of extreme poverty, but also of immense love between the siblings and their absent mother, who worked as a housekeeper, office cleaner at night, and on weekends sold homemade sweets to supplement her income. Miss Johnson only sleeps 3 hours a day, explained Emily naturally. She says she'll rest plenty after we get our own house. I take care of Michael so she can work more. As the night progressed, Michael's condition gradually improved. Preliminary tests confirmed the doctor's suspicion. There was a congenital malformation affecting the boy's respiratory system. He needs surgery, Dr. Roberts informed, and the sooner the better. Then we'll do it tomorrow, decided Richard. The doctor explained it wasn't that simple. They needed to stabilize the boy's condition, prepare the specialized team, get authorizations. Without the presence of the mother or legal guardian, we cannot perform invasive procedures like surgery. And what if his condition worsens during the night? Questioned Richard, irritated with the bureaucracy. We have protocols for emergencies, but Emily, who was listening attentively, interrupted. Can I call my mom? She must be worried because we didn't come back, and she can authorize whatever Michael needs. Richard felt ashamed for not having thought of this before. Of course, the children's mother would be desperate by now. He offered his own cell phone to the girl, who recited the number from memory. The call was brief and revealing. On the other end, an exhausted and tearful voice expressed a mixture of relief and fear. Emily explained the situation with impressive clarity for her age, mentioning the name of the hospital and even the medications her brother was receiving. My mom is coming, she announced afterward, returning the phone. But it will take a while because the last bus to the Upper East Side already left, and she'll have to take the subway to Grand Central and then walk. That's absurd, reacted Richard, immediately calling his driver. He gave precise instructions about where to find the woman and bring her urgently. Almost 3 hours later, Sarah Johnson arrived at the hospital, soaked and breathless despite the ride. She was a young woman, couldn't have been more than 25 years old, but her face carried the marks of a hard life. Upon seeing her children, she ran to embrace them, checking Michael with the experienced eyes of a mother who had faced many health crises with her son. Thank you for helping my children, she said to Richard, her voice choked. I'll never be able to repay this, but if you give me some time, I'll work double and... Don't worry about that now, interrupted Richard, uncomfortable. Your son needs surgery. The doctors will explain everything. While Sarah spoke with the medical team, signing authorizations and providing Michael's medical history, Richard observed Emily. The girl had finally fallen asleep in the armchair next to her brother's bed, still holding his little hand. There was a moving beauty in that scene, a purity he hadn't seen in a long time in his world of negotiations, contracts, and corporate betrayals. At some point, Sarah approached him again, now calmer. "Why did you do this?" she asked directly. "Why did you help my children?" The question caught Richard by surprise. It was something he himself was still trying to understand. "Your daughter reminded me of someone," he finally answered. "She has determination, and she made me remember that not everything in this life is solved with money and power." Sarah nodded, understanding something between the lines. "Do you have children?" A heavy silence settled between them. "I had a girl," he replied, the words coming with difficulty. "Hannah. She is no longer with us. She would be about Emily's age now." "I'm so sorry," said Sarah sincerely. "Losing a child must be—" "Let's talk about Michael," Richard diverted, unable to continue that conversation. "The surgery is scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Until then, he'll remain under observation. All costs are covered. Don't worry about that." "I can't accept," protested Sarah, pride evident in her tired eyes. "It's not fair that—" "Nothing in this life is fair, Ms. Johnson," interrupted Richard. "It's not fair that a young woman like you has to work 3 jobs to support 2 children. It's not fair that a 6-year-old girl has to sell candy at traffic lights and knows how to navigate public transit alone to save her brother. It's not fair that a baby is born with a condition that threatens his life. Accept my help not as charity, but as an attempt to balance the scales a little." Sarah stared at him for long seconds, as if evaluating not just his words, but everything behind them. "You're not what they say about you," she concluded. "And what do they say?" asked Richard, genuinely curious. "That you're a cold, calculating man, that you build fortunes on the suffering of others, that you have no heart." He smiled humorlessly. "Maybe I am exactly what they say. Maybe this is just a moment of weakness that will soon pass." "No," Sarah stated with surprising conviction. "My mother always said that eyes don't lie, and yours are truly seeing my children. That's rare, Mr. Blackwell. People like us are usually invisible to people like you." Her words hit Richard with the force of a punch. How many Emilys and Michaels had he ignored over the years? How many Sarahs had been fired from his companies because they needed to miss work to care for sick children? That night, while Sarah finally rested beside her children in the comfortable hospital room, Richard returned to his triple penthouse on 5th Avenue. The automatic lights turned on as they detected his presence, illuminating the 6,000 square feet of luxury and solitude. He poured himself a rare whiskey and walked to the terrace from where he could see part of the city. Somewhere down there, thousands of Sarahs were returning exhausted to their homes after double or triple shifts. Thousands of Emilys were taking on responsibilities too great for their small shoulders. And how many Michaels couldn't even make it to a hospital? For the first time in many years, Richard Blackwell felt ashamed of his wealth, his power, and especially his indifference. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was his brother Robert. "We lost the Chinese," he informed bluntly. "They didn't like hearing that you cancelled the meeting at the last minute. They went to Hartford Developments. On any other day, this news would have been devastating. A nearly $200 million deal lost to the main competitor. But that night, Richard surprised even himself with his reaction. "There are more important things, Robert." "Are you drunk?" His brother's voice sounded incredulous. "Maybe I'm finally getting sober," replied Richard, before hanging up. In the 2 days that followed, he divided his time between the office and the hospital. Something about that family intrigued him, attracted him, as if there were a connection he still couldn't clearly see. Michael was responding well to the preoperative treatment. Sarah had to return to work, at risk of losing one of her jobs, but spent all her free hours at the hospital. Emily remained almost always by her brother's side, talking to him, telling stories, making sure he was comfortable. "Do you like stories?" Richard asked her one afternoon when he found her reading aloud a disease prevention brochure she had found on the room's table. "I like them a lot. At school, the teacher reads to us, but only once a week," replied Emily. "I already know how to read a little, but some words are difficult." The next day, Richard brought a bag full of children's books. Emily's eyes lit up as if she had received a treasure, which, in a way, was true. "Can I really keep them?" she asked incredulously, caressing the colorful covers. "Of course you can, they're yours. The girl looked at her brother in the bed. "I'll read all of them to Michael. He likes it when I make up stories, but real stories must be even better." While Emily explored her new treasure, Richard received a call from Deborah. "Sir, that investigation you requested about the Johnson family, we have some preliminary information." He moved to the corridor, out of earshot of the attentive girl. "I'm listening." Sarah Johnson, 24 years old, single mother. The children's father abandoned her during her second pregnancy without legally recognizing Michael. She works as a housekeeper in 3 fixed residences in Westchester County, night cleaner at an office in Midtown, and sells baked goods on weekends. She lives in a housing project in the South Bronx, a 1-room apartment. Emily attends public school when her mother can take her. Michael stays with a neighbor or with his sister. Both have a history of respiratory problems, especially the boy. "Any police record, drugs?" asked Richard, feeling slightly guilty for investigating the family's life. "None of that, sir. On the contrary, Sarah has certificates from vocational courses she took at non-profits, always trying to improve her life. She's well regarded by employers and neighbors, who say she works herself to death for her children. The girl is also praised by her teachers, very intelligent and responsible." Richard nodded, though Deborah couldn't see him. That confirmed his impressions. "There's one more thing, sir," continued Deborah. "Sarah Johnson briefly worked in the cleaning crew at one of Blackwell construction sites about 3 years ago through a subcontractor. She was fired after repeatedly missing work to take her newborn son, Michael, to the doctor. Ironically, it was at the construction of that same hospital where he's now admitted." Richard froze. A piece of the puzzle fell into place. "Thank you. Deborah, keep investigating. I want to know more about the children's father, too." When he returned to the room, he found Emily asleep on top of an open book. She finally looked like a child, not the little adult who carried enormous responsibilities. Gently, he removed the book and covered her with a blanket. Michael's surgery was a success. The medical team managed to correct the malformation that was compromising his respiratory system. Recovery would be long, but the prognosis was excellent. Sarah cried with relief at the news, and for the first time since he had met her, Richard saw a genuine smile light up her tired face. "I'll never be able to thank you enough," she said, when they were alone in the waiting room. "You don't need to thank me," he replied, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Actually, I have a proposal for you, Sarah." She looked at him apprehensively. "What kind of proposal?" "It's not what you're thinking," Richard hastened, noticing her suspicion. "It's a job offer at my company with full benefits and a salary that will allow you to leave your other jobs." Sarah stared at him, distrustful. "Why?" "Because you deserve a chance, and because your daughter made me see that I've been part of the problem, not the solution. How many families like yours work on the construction of my luxury developments and then return to run-down apartments without minimum conditions of safety and health?" Sarah remained silent, evaluating his words. "It's not charity," insisted Richard. "It's an opportunity, for you and for me. You'll have a decent job, and I'll have peace of mind knowing that at least one person won't have to choose between working or caring for their children." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now continuing. "And what exactly would I have to do?" asked Sarah, still cautious. The question caught Richard by surprise. He hadn't thought about the details. "Well, you could..." He hesitated, realizing he was improvising. "Work in my office, or wherever you prefer. We can find a role suitable to your skills." "I don't have a degree, Mr. Blackwell," replied Sarah with dignity. "I never could go to college. I know how to clean, cook, take care of children. I learned a little about baking. Nothing more." "You underestimate your abilities, Sarah," said Richard. "I've seen how you speak with the doctors, how you quickly understand complex information, how you organize everything regarding your children, even while working 3 jobs. That's management, leadership, emotional intelligence, things you don't learn in any college." Her eyes shone with contained tears. "Do you really believe that, or are you just being kind?" "Kind is not an adjective people usually use to describe me," smiled Richard. "I'm being sincere and also selfish in a way. Your daughter, she awakened something in me, Something I thought had died a long time ago. Sarah nodded slowly. Emily has that effect on people. She is special. Yes, she is. And she deserves a better future than selling candy at traffic lights. The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Sarah seemed divided between pride and practical necessity. "I accept," she finally said, "but with one condition." "Which is?" asked Richard, surprised. "That it's not just for me, that other women like me have the same opportunity." Richard wasn't expecting this. He was offering an individual lifeline, and she was thinking collectively. "What do you mean?" "In the housing project where I live, there are dozens of single mothers, many in worse situations than mine. Women with 3, 4 children, some caring for grandchildren too. They don't need charity, Mr. Blackwell. They need opportunity, as you said yourself." He was silent, evaluating the impact of those words. "Am I suggesting something unfeasible?" asked Sarah, interpreting his silence as refusal. "No," he replied slowly. "You're suggesting something I should have thought of a long time ago." That night Richard couldn't sleep. Sarah's proposal had triggered an avalanche of ideas and reflections. His real estate empire had been built exploiting cheap labor, ignoring precarious working conditions, turning a blind eye to the reality of the people who built the luxury dreams of his wealthy clients. Emily, with her courage and determination to save her brother, had broken something inside him. And now Sarah, with her dignity and collective vision, was completing the process. The next morning, he called an urgent meeting with the company's board. His brother Robert and the other executives looked at him with apprehension as he outlined his new vision. A direct hiring program without subcontractors, prioritizing single mothers and women who are heads of households with on-site childcare, family health insurance and possibilities for internal growth, summarized Richard. "We'll start with 50 positions and expand according to the results." "Have you lost your mind?" asked Robert openly. "This will erode our profit margin. The shareholders will kill us." "On the contrary," countered Richard calmly, "we're going to transform this into our competitive advantage, building not just buildings, but futures, our new marketing campaign." "And who's going to pay for this?" insisted Robert. "I will. Personally, if necessary," replied Richard. "But it won't be necessary. We'll redistribute resources, starting with our annual bonuses." A murmur of disapproval ran through the room. "Who's with me?" asked Richard, facing each of those present. Silence was his answer. "Fine, then you're all fired." A collective shock took over the room. "You can't do that," protested one of the directors. "The board—" "I am the majority shareholder," reminded Richard. "And I'm willing to buy the shares of anyone who disagrees with the new direction of the company, with a 15% premium, which is more than generous in the current market." No one questioned again. While the tumultuous meeting continued at the office, Sarah was being discharged from the hospital with Michael. The boy would still need special care, but could continue treatment at home. "We'll need to come every week for follow-up appointments," explained Dr. Roberts, handing Sarah a list of medications and care instructions. The young mother looked at the paper with apprehension. "That's a lot of medicine." "All covered by the hospital's special program," assured the doctor with a knowing smile. "Mr. Blackwell arranged everything." Sarah smiled, grateful, while Emily carefully packed the books she had received into the worn backpack she had brought from home. "We can take the books, right?" asked the girl, hesitant. "Of course you can," replied the nurse accompanying them. "They're gifts for you." When they were about to leave, Richard appeared in the corridor, visibly agitated after the meeting. "I'm glad I caught you," he said, relieved. "I got the news that you'd be discharged today." "Yes, we're going home," confirmed Sarah. "Michael is much better." Richard approached the boy, who now looked at him with curiosity, without the veil of illness that had afflicted him days before. He was a beautiful child, with large, expressive eyes like his sister's. "Hi, Michael," smiled Richard, receiving a shy smile in return. "He doesn't talk much yet," explained Emily, "but he understands everything." "I'm sure he does," agreed Richard. "Just as I'm sure you'll read many stories to him now." Emily nodded, proud, hugging the backpack with the books. "Do you have a way to get home?" asked Richard to Sarah. "We'll take the bus," she replied. "We've caused enough trouble." "Not at all," disagreed Richard. "My driver is available to take you, and actually I'd like to accompany you if you don't mind. We have that pending conversation about the job." Sarah hesitated. "Mr. Blackwell, that's very kind, but please call me Richard. And it's not kindness, it's mutual interest." On the way to the South Bronx, Richard explained his idea for the hiring program, inspired by Sarah's suggestion. She listened attentively, asking perceptive questions that surprised him with their practical and comprehensive vision. "We could start with a pilot project in the community," she suggested. "I know women with different skills, excellent seamstresses, bakers, craftswomen, besides those who work in construction. A local training center would reduce transportation costs and allow them to be near their children." Richard made mental notes, impressed. Sarah spoke with first-hand knowledge and genuine passion for collective improvement. When the luxury car entered the narrow streets of the South Bronx, many heads turned. It wasn't common to see a latest model Mercedes in those streets, much less with a uniformed driver. "You can drop us off here," requested Sarah, embarrassed, when they reached an area where the car couldn't advance further. "The rest of the way is on foot." "I'll go with you," decided Richard, to everyone's surprise, including the drivers. "Sir, are you sure?" questioned the driver, looking apprehensively at the steep, potholed alley that stretched ahead. "Absolutely," replied Richard, helping Sarah out with Michael in her arms. Emily naturally took his hand, as if they were old friends. "Watch out for the holes," warned the girl. "When it rains, everything gets full of mud and trash." The path to the Johnson family's home was a lesson in social inequality. With each step, Richard confronted a reality he had preferred to ignore throughout his adult life. Makeshift apartments with various materials, open sewage, dangerous electrical connections forming a chaotic web above their heads. "This is our home," announced Sarah finally, stopping in front of a partially finished concrete structure with a zinc roof and a plywood door. The space couldn't have been more than 150 square feet. A curtain divided what would be the living room from a space that functioned as a bedroom. A small sink and a hot plate made up the kitchen. There was no internal bathroom. Sarah explained that they used the communal bathroom at the end of the alley. Emily quickly picked up an improvised broom and began cleaning the floor, while Sarah organized a clean space on the only bed to place Michael. "Sorry about the simplicity," she said, visibly embarrassed by Richard's presence in that environment. "Don't apologize," he replied, his voice choked with an emotion he couldn't name. "I should be the one apologizing for never having really seen this." His words hung in the air, loaded with meaning. The contrast between that apartment and his triple penthouse was so violent it was almost obscene. "Our house is small, but it's clean," defended Emily with pride. "Mom always says we may be poor, but we don't have to be dirty." "And she's right," agreed Richard, moved by that family's dignity. Sarah prepared a simple coffee, serving it in chipped but immaculately clean mugs. While they discussed the details of the hiring program, Richard observed Emily carefully arranging the books she had received on an improvised shelf made of bricks and boards. "Emily loves to study," commented I. Sarah following his gaze. "Her teacher says she's very intelligent, could go far if she had the opportunity." "And she will," affirmed Richard with a certainty that surprised him. When he was about to leave, a heavy rain began to fall. The zinc roof amplified the noise, making it difficult even to talk. Soon leaks appeared in various points of the apartment. Sarah and Emily moved with the efficiency of those accustomed to this situation, positioning buckets and pans to collect the water. Michael began to cough, the alarming sound reminding everyone of his fragile condition. "The dampness isn't good for him," explained Sarah, worried. "Normally I ask a neighbor to shelter us when it rains like this, but with him coming back from the hospital," Richard made an instant decision. "You're coming with me. I have an empty apartment in Murray Hill near the hospital. You can stay there until we resolve this situation." Sarah's eyes widened, surprised by the offer. "We can't accept that, it's too much." "It's not a favor, Sarah," interrupted Richard. "It's a medical necessity. Michael needs a dry, clean environment to recover. Consider it an advance for the work you're going to start doing for my company." The rain intensified, and one of the Walls began to show worrying infiltrations. Michael was coughing more and more. "Let's go, Mum," pleaded Emily, concerned about her brother. "Please." Faced with the situation and her daughter's imploring look, Sarah finally agreed. "Just until Michael is completely recovered," she established, maintaining her dignity. "And we'll pay rent as soon as I start working." Richard nodded, respecting her position. In less than an hour, the Johnson family was settled in a 3-bedroom apartment in Murray Hill. It was a property that Richard maintained for company guests, rarely used. Simple by his standards, but absolutely luxurious for Sarah and her children. "There's hot water in the shower," exclaimed Emily in wonder after exploring the apartment, "and a huge bathtub." Sarah seemed out of place among the expensive furniture and modern appliances. "I don't even know how to use half of these things," she confessed. "You'll learn quickly," assured Richard, "and if you have any questions, just ask the doorman or call me." Before leaving, he observed Michael already, asleep in the master bedroom, breathing calmly, without the noise of leaks or the smell of mold. "Thank you," said Sarah simply when she accompanied him to the door. You're changing our lives." "You changed mine first," replied Richard, and for the first time in years, he felt genuine peace. In the days that followed, Richard dove head first into implementing his new program. He faced resistance from the board, threats from shareholders, criticism from the specialized press that questioned his new philanthropy as a marketing ploy or a midlife crisis. Robert, his brother, was the most vocal of the critics. "You're throwing away the work of a lifetime because of a maid and her street kids," he questioned, furious, during a heated discussion. "For the first time, I'm doing something that really matters," countered Richard. "And don't talk about them like that. That maid has more integrity in her little finger than both of us will have in our entire lives. And the children, you should meet them before judging them." "Are you in love with her? Is that it?" "An affair with the cleaning lady to compensate for your loneliness," provoked Robert, touching on a sensitive point. Richard felt his blood boil. "My relationship with Sarah is strictly professional and respectful. Don't dare insinuate otherwise again." The truth was that in the weeks that followed, Richard had indeed developed great affection for Sarah. He admired her intelligence, her determination, her integrity. But above all, he respected her independence and her story. What he felt was not a romantic interest, but a deep admiration and the sincere desire to repair at least a little the injustices that people like him had perpetuated against people like her. Sarah, for her part, demonstrated a natural talent for organization and management. In a short time, she became a fundamental part in developing the training and hiring program. Her practical vision and knowledge of the community's reality brought perspectives that no expensive consultant could ever offer. Michael recovered rapidly in the new environment. Regular consultations with Dr. Roberts showed consistent advances, and soon the boy was running and playing like any child his age. Emily had flourished extraordinarily. Enrolled in a private school near the new apartment, she soon stood out for her intelligence and thirst for knowledge. The teachers never tired of praising her potential, and she absorbed each new piece of information like a sponge. Every night, when Richard called to check on them, Emily made a point of reading to him excerpts from the books she was discovering. They developed the habit of discussing the stories, and Richard was surprised by the girls' perceptive observations about characters and situations. About 2 months after the fateful encounter at the hospital, Blackwell Construction's Building Futures program was in full operation. More than 60 women, most single mothers from underprivileged communities, had been hired with full benefits. A training center in the South Bronx offered vocational courses in various areas, and a daycare center served the employees' children during working hours. The press, which had initially criticized the initiative as social marketing, now celebrated it as an example of corporate responsibility. Investors who had threatened to withdraw their capital were returning, attracted by the positive publicity and the surprising improvement in productivity. Motivated and loyal employees produced more and better. Sarah had been promoted to program coordinator, with a salary she had never dreamed possible. She continued living in the Murray Hill apartment, now paying a symbolic rent that she had insisted on establishing in writing. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Richard received an unexpected invitation. "We'd like you to come have lunch with us," said Sarah on the phone. "Emily insists on cooking for you. She learned how to make lasagna and wants to show off her culinary talents." The invitation caught him by surprise. Although they maintained constant contact because of work, and he always asked about the children, they had never established a social relationship outside the professional context. "I'm sure it will be delicious," he replied, feeling unexpected joy. Upon arriving at the apartment, he was greeted by a proud Emily, wearing an improvised apron, and with her face stained with tomato sauce. "I made almost all of it myself," she announced. "Mom only helped me with the oven." Michael ran to hug him, a novelty that warmed Richard's heart. The boy, once so fragile, now overflowed with energy and health. The lunch was surprisingly pleasant and relaxed. The lasagna was really good, especially considering it had been made by a 6-year-old child. They talked about school, about Sarah's work, about the program's advances. Emily animatedly told about the science project she was developing, something related to medicinal plants, inspired by stories she had heard from her grandmother. Richard realized he hadn't felt so comfortable and at peace in many years. Perhaps since... "Are you sad?" Emily suddenly asked, observing him attentively. "No, why?" Richard was surprised. "Your eyes got different when you looked at our family picture," explained the girl simply, "like you remembered something sad." The comment, so direct and perceptive, left Richard momentarily speechless. Sarah seemed embarrassed. "Emily, don't be indiscreet," she gently reprimanded. "It's okay," assured Richard. "She's right, actually. I was remembering my daughter." A respectful silence followed his statement. Sarah knew partially about his story, but they had never openly discussed the subject. "You had a daughter?" asked Emily with genuine interest. "Where is she now?" "Emily," Sarah reprimanded more firmly this time. "Don't worry, Sarah," Richard reassured. "It's a natural question." He turned to Emily. "My daughter passed away many years ago. She got very sick, like your brother, but back then we couldn't find the right treatment." Emily processed the information slowly. "She went to heaven?" "Yes," replied Richard simply, his voice choked. "She went to heaven." The girl approached and, in a surprisingly tender gesture, held his hand. "You know, my grandma used to say that people in heaven can see us, and they're happy when we help others. Your daughter must be very proud of you for helping Michael." Richard felt the tears he had repressed for so many years finally overflow. They weren't just tears of pain, but also of healing. "Thank you, Emily," was all he could say. The moment was interrupted by Michael, who came running with a colorful drawing. "For you," announced the boy, extending the paper to Richard. The drawing showed 4 people holding hands, 2 adults and 2 children, as could be deduced from the proportions. Above, a smiling sun, and in the corner, a winged figure that seemed to be watching over everyone. "It's our family," explained Emily. "And here," she pointed to the winged figure, "is your daughter looking at us from heaven." Sarah seemed mortified. "Richard, I'm sorry, the children don't understand." "It's perfect," he interrupted, holding the drawing carefully. "That's the most beautiful gift I've ever received." That night, upon returning to his empty, silent penthouse, Richard made a decision. He picked up the phone and, for the first time in almost a decade, called his ex-wife. "Margaret, it's Richard. We need to talk." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The meeting with Margaret was set at a neutral cafe, territory that didn't carry memories for either of them. When she arrived, Richard almost didn't recognize her. The years had been kind to her appearance, but her eyes carried the same weight he saw in his own every morning in the mirror. "You look different," she commented after the initial greetings, studying him with curiosity. "People change," replied Richard simply. "Some do," conceded Margaret with a slight sad smile. For a few minutes, they talked about trivialities, the weather, mutual acquaintances, real estate market news that Margaret followed out of the habit of years as his wife. "Why did you call me here, Richard?" she finally asked, when the silence began to stretch uncomfortably. He took a deep breath. To ask for forgiveness. Her eyes widened in surprise. Forgiveness? For not being there when you and Hannah needed me most. For putting work, money, and power above my family. For pulling away when the pain became unbearable instead of facing our grief together. For all the years of resentment and silence. Margaret sat motionless, her hands gripping the coffee cup so tightly that her knuckles turned white. What happened to you? She finally asked, her voice trembling. Richard then told her about Emily and Michael, about Sarah, about how that accidental encounter had awakened in him feelings and values he thought were lost forever. That little girl reminded me so much of her, he confessed, his voice choked. The same determination, the same courage, and the boy had the same condition as Hannah. But today there's treatment, a cure. If we had waited just a few more years... Don't do this to yourself, interrupted Margaret, surprising him by touching his hand. We can't live on what-ifs. Believe me, I spent years thinking about what we could have done differently, and it only destroyed me inside. How did you manage to move forward? Asked Richard, genuinely curious. One day at a time, she replied simply. I found comfort in helping other families with children in the same situation. Richard nodded, understanding perfectly. That's exactly what I'm trying to do now. I heard about your new program, confirmed Margaret. It's in the news. I confess, I was surprised. It didn't seem like the Richard I knew in recent years. It wasn't. That man was lost. They talked for hours, sharing memories of Hannah that they had kept to themselves for so long. They cried together, laughed together, and when they finally said goodbye, something of the immense weight they carried seemed to have diminished a little. I'd like to meet them someday, said Margaret as she was leaving. This family that brought you back. In the weeks that followed, the Building Futures program expanded even more. With the support of other business people who began to take an interest in the initiative, Richard managed to expand the training center and open a branch in another underprivileged community. Sarah demonstrated increasing aptitude for management and leadership. She had proposed and implemented significant improvements, and her knowledge of the reality of the families served brought an invaluable perspective to the project. Michael was completely recovered and now attended the same school as Emily. The girl continued to surprise everyone with her intelligence and sensitivity. She had been selected to represent the school in a math Olympiad, to the pride of Sarah, and surprisingly also of Richard, who followed her progress as if he were a close family member. The relationship between them had evolved into something that none could clearly define. It wasn't exactly a friendship, nor a professional relationship, much less a family bond in the traditional sense. It was a unique connection, forged in extraordinary circumstances that had profoundly transformed them all. On a sunny Sunday, Richard invited Sarah and the children to see a new company development, a complex of affordable housing built with sustainable practices and facilitated financing for low-income families. It's beautiful, exclaimed Emily, upon seeing the set of colorful buildings, with green areas, a playground, and a school within the complex itself. I'd like you to see a specific apartment, said Richard, guiding them to the central block. The apartment in question had 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a functional kitchen, and a small balcony. It was completely furnished and decorated, with good taste, but without excesses or unnecessary luxuries. It's perfect, commented Sarah, admiring the space. The families who will live here will be very happy. Actually, said Richard, extending an envelope to her, this one is yours if you want to accept it. Sarah looked at him confused, then at the envelope in her hands. What is this? The deed. It's in your name. An astonished silence filled the room. Emily and Michael stopped exploring the apartment and approached, sensing the sudden tension. I can't accept this, said Sarah finally, trying to return the envelope. It's too much. You've already done so much for us. It's not a gift, explained Richard. It's part of the program. All coordinators are entitled to an apartment. It's in the contract you signed if you read the fine print. It was an outright lie, and from Sarah's look she knew it. Richard, please accept it, he asked, serious. Not for you, but for them. He indicated the children with a nod. Emily deserves a room where she can study without leaks. Michael needs a healthy environment to grow up strong. And you deserve a place that reflects your dignity and your worth. Sarah looked at her children, then back at Richard. Her eyes shone with contained tears. "Why are you doing all this? The truth, please." "Because you saved me," he replied simply. "That day at the hospital, it wasn't just Michael who was saved. I had been dying inside for years and didn't know it. You brought me back to life." Emily, who was listening attentively, approached and took her mother's hand. "Can we stay, Mom? There's a room just for me and Michael, and a big table for me to study." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at her son, and finally at Richard. "I accept," she said, her voice firm despite the emotion, "but with one condition, that it's not just for us, that other families also have this opportunity." Richard smiled, already expecting this. "It's already being arranged. This is just the first of several complexes, and for each new luxury development we build, we'll finance a social project like this one." That night, when Sarah and the children returned to the Murray Hill apartment to start organizing the move, Richard went back to his penthouse with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his youth. His phone rang. It was Robert. "The numbers for the last quarter are in," his brother informed reluctantly. "You were right. The program increased our positive visibility, and sales grew by 22%. "It's not about the numbers, Robert," replied Richard calmly. "It always was about the numbers for you," countered his brother, confused. "Not anymore, now it's about the people." The transformation of Richard Blackwell became a case study in business schools and a topic of reports in the specialized press. From real estate shark to pioneer of corporate social responsibility, his reputation had completely changed. But none of that mattered as much as the real changes in real people's lives. The program had already benefited more than 200 families directly and influenced other companies to follow similar paths. Sarah now directed the entire social division of Blackwell Construction with a team of 40 people under her leadership. Her life experience and natural intelligence had proved an unbeatable combination for understanding the needs of the communities served. Emily continued to excel at school and now dreamed of becoming an engineer to build houses for everyone, as she said. Michael, completely recovered, was a happy and healthy boy, without any sequelae from the condition that had almost taken him. On a Sunday afternoon, almost a year after the fateful encounter at the hospital, Richard was participating in a lunch at Sarah's new home. Margaret, his ex-wife, was also present. To everyone's surprise, the two women had developed a genuine friendship, united both by their affection for the children and by having shared similar life experiences, despite their different social backgrounds. "I still can't believe you managed to convince the mayor to approve that land for the community center," commented Margaret to Sarah while helping serve dessert. "Richard did the hard part," replied Sarah modestly. "I just showed the data that proved the need." "Don't be modest," intervened Richard. "It was your passionate speech that convinced those bureaucrats. I've never seen the housing secretary so moved." Emily, who was listening to the conversation while drawing at the nearby table, suddenly stood up with a piece of paper in her hand. "I drew a picture of our family," she announced proudly, placing the paper in the center of the table. The drawing showed several people holding hands, Sarah, Emily, and Michael in the center. Beside them, Richard and Margaret, and around them dozens of small figures representing the families helped by the program. "This is our family now," explained the girl. "Big, colorful, and happy." The adults looked at each other, moved by the simplicity and depth of that statement. "You're right, sweetheart," agreed Sarah, hugging her daughter. "This is our family now." Richard observed the scene with a full heart. The journey that had begun with a desperate little girl screaming for help to save her brother had transformed into something much bigger, the salvation of many lives, including his own. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, they all went to the apartment's balcony, from where they could see in the distance the outlines of the South Bronx. The community where it all began now housed the program's largest training center, model daycare, and the first of many dignified homes being built. "One day places like those won't exist anymore," said Emily thoughtfully, looking at the distant projects. "Everyone will have a good house to live in." "That's a beautiful dream, sweetheart," commented Sarah, caressing her hair. It's not just a dream, intervened Richard. It's a plan, and we'll work together to make it happen. Michael, who was playing nearby, approached and raised his arms to Richard, asking to be picked up. The businessman lifted him with ease, remembering the first day he had seen him, so small and fragile, fighting to breathe in his sister's arms. "Thank you for not letting my little brother go," said Emily suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "That day in the rain, I was so afraid of losing him." Richard crouched down, getting to the girl's eye level, still with Michael in his arms. "You know what I learned from you, Emily, that sometimes, when we help someone breathe, we ourselves start breathing again too." The girl smiled, intuitively understanding the depth of those simple words. Beside him, Sarah and Margaret exchanged knowing looks, both witnesses to the extraordinary transformation that the meeting of those souls had triggered. The sun was setting on the New York horizon, tinting the sky orange and pink. Below, millions of lives followed their course, hundreds of them now on different trajectories, thanks to a brave little girl who, on a rainy day, had desperately screamed, "Sir, my little brother isn't breathing," and a man who, after years of living without really living, had decided to listen. The end of the story. And you, do you believe that small gestures can transform lives? Share your opinion in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel for more stories that move and inspire.